Welcome, welcome. I want to say thank you so much for joining us for today's conversation. This is Lauren Fogelman with Business Success Solution, and today's topic is everything you wanted to know about enrolled agents but were afraid to ask. And we're going to be having this conversation with Shannon Hall. I want to let you know you are in the right place if you're interested in being an enrolled agent, the benefits that clients receive from engaging the services of enrolled agents, and the path to start becoming one, if that is something that interests you. I suggest you have pen and paper ready because Shannon is very generous. She is going to share a lot. She is a natural educator, and we'll let you know where to find more as we wrap up today's conversation. A little bit about Shannon. Shannon Hall is an enrolled agent. She's also a national speaker on tax issues and founder of Shannon Hall Tax in Southern California. She takes a personalized approach to make sure that each client is reaching their goals and getting the best results possible when tax time comes around. She's been working in the field of tax preparation for over 15 years and loves the fact that there is so much to learn and know about taxes. It is ever changing, and you can never get bored. I want to say if you take any additional credits for tax preparation, CPEs, you want to go to one of her sessions because they are not your typical tax education session. I'm telling you from personal experience. And you can learn more about Shannon Hall Tax at shannonhalltax.com, and we'll put that link below as well. But let's go ahead and just get right into this conversation. Shannon, thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm very excited.
Absolutely. And right from the beginning, I just want to know, what is it that was calling you to become a tax preparer and where you just love everything regarding taxes?
Well, I'll tell you, I actually have a pretty unconventional story. My background is actually in classical theater. I have a degree in classical theater and a degree in English. So it wasn't a really natural progression to end up here, but I had been working in LA trying to be an actor, and it didn't really go as I had planned, I think. And so I moved back home and ended up with a job at a tax office as an office manager. And I was dealing with tax forms and doing all the work. And I just was really fascinated by everything that was happening. And so I became a certified tax preparer, and then I went on and got an accounting degree and became an enrolled agent. And I just absolutely love it. I think I always really liked research and learning and all of that kind of stuff. And this job really lets me do that all the time. And so I really enjoy it.
And what I have found is that the average person knows about CPAs, they know about accountants, bookkeepers, but they don't always know about enrolled agents. Enrolled agents are like a hidden gem, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
So can you actually define, so we're all on the same page, about what is an enrolled agent?
Absolutely. So an enrolled agent is a federally licensed tax-specific preparer. We're enrolled with the Department of the Treasury, and we have unlimited practice rights before the IRS. So that means we can represent our clients in audits, we can do collections actions, all of that good stuff. We're regulated by, like I said, the Department of the Treasury is the one who oversees enrolled agents. And the profession actually goes all the way back to the 1800s. After the Civil War, there were a lot of these sort of questionable claims being made as far as property that was being recovered after the war ended. And because of those claims, the enrolled agent profession was established to sort of work with the taxpayers and the government to make sure that these questionable claims weren't being paid out.
Okay. And once again, most people, when they think about taxes, they just naturally, in a very generic way, think about CPAs, kind of like when you think about tissues, you think Kleenex or copy machine Xerox. So what would you say is the difference between an EA and a CPA?
So CPAs generally, there's a couple of main differences. The primary one is that enrolled agents are licensed by the federal government. CPAs are regulated by state boards of accountancy. And CPAs, there are a lot of fantastic tax-specific CPAs that I know. And interestingly, I know a lot of CPAs who are also EAs. So there is an additional benefit to having that distinction. But CPAs tend to be more general accountants focused. So it's not necessarily a tax focus. EAs are specifically for tax tax. That's all we focus on as far as that designation goes. So it's a lot more laser focused on tax as a thing versus like CPAs who some of them do tax, but a lot of them don't.
The other thing that I have found, which is really very fascinating, is that if you want to be a CPA, you're typically going to college for 4 years and getting a degree and then sitting for the exams and so on and so forth. But for an EA, there's no education barrier or requirements. Is that true?
That is true. The
So
requirement, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Please add, and then I'll go on with that.
No, one of the interesting things about tax, I think, is that for a lot of people, it becomes sort of a second career. People start off in one field and then find themselves in the field of tax. And so it is nice that you don't have to have that specific tax education, a master's in taxation or anything like that to become an enrolled agent. The requirements are different.
Also, what I have seen is a lot of people might start out with bookkeeping and then they become tax preparers. And the next level in that journey would be an EA. Is that what you've seen also?
Yeah, definitely. We see a lot of that progression as well.
And do you see benefits for bookkeepers becoming EAs?
I think there can be benefits. One of the really nice things about it is the rights that we have with the IRS and the information that we can access. You have very limited resources when you're an unenrolled preparer. So you can't get certain information. You're limited in how much you can help your clients. Having that EA designation that allows you to get powers of attorney with the IRS. And so you can get a lot more information and help your clients a lot more that way.
Okay, let's talk about the client side a little bit. What does actually engage in the services of an EA mean for the clients? And are there certain things which you've mentioned a little bit that you would be able to do that an unenrolled tax preparer just isn't able to do at all?
Yeah, so one of the biggest things is being able to file a power of attorney with the IRS. If you're an unenrolled preparer, you can file, it's called an 8821. It's a tax information authorization. And you can use that to get some very basic information, but you can only do that if you actually prepared their tax return. If you have an EA or another professional designation can do it as well, but EA specifically, you can file a power of attorney. You can get all kinds of information, even if they're a new client to you, if you have no relationship with them prior. So it unlocks a lot of areas where we can really provide additional services. Also, because enrolled agents are bound by a set of ethical rules. The ethics for tax preparers or for enrolled agents are laid out in, it's called Circular 230, is sort of the scout handbook for all of the ethics and the guidelines that we have to follow. And so when you work with an enrolled agent, you know that you're going to be getting somebody who is bound by these ethical standards, and you can expect a certain level of a higher standard of ethics, perhaps, than, not that there aren't ethical preparers all over the place, but we are really bound by the Circular 230 rules.
Okay, then part of what I'm hearing from the client side is that you get someone that can represent you for the IRS, because I think that there are so many people, they just get those 2 change of address letters, and they are seeing the letterhead and they're freaking out. They don't even want to open it up. So They can bring it to you, whatever they get from the IRS, especially if there's a change in the tax law and the states aren't really catching it. And then they're getting some letters from that they're out of compliance. And you can go ahead and represent them on their behalf. Is that correct?
Absolutely, yes.
Now, does that apply to tax resolution also?
Yes, definitely. So tax preparers are, like I said, enrolled agents, we have these unlimited practice rights. So you can go there. You can also, if you're kind of crazy, you can get an additional designation, which is called a U.S. tax court practitioner, which is actually something I've been thinking about doing, but it's another very grueling exam, I've heard. But you can, as an enrolled agent, you can become a member of the bar of the federal courts, and you can actually represent clients at tax court as a non-attorney. So that's something that you can also do as an enrolled agent.
That's fascinating. So instead of maybe someone needing to hire an attorney that also might be a CPA also, because they do tax law, they can go right to you, and really you can go ahead and benefit, and you can represent them as well.
Absolutely.
And what is it that maybe clients need to understand about tax preparers and oversight? Anything that would be helpful for them to know?
So one of the things that's really interesting to me, I think, is and a lot of people I think don't know this, is that there is not a lot of regulation on tax preparers across the country. There are only a handful of states that require tax preparers to be registered or licensed. California, Oregon, New York, I think there's maybe 2 more. But other than that, anybody in any of those other states can just hang out a shingle and say, I'm a tax preparer, I'll do your taxes. There's no education requirements. There's no competence proof. It's you just kind of say, I'm going to do it, you do it. And so that can be kind of an issue, because if there aren't these requirements to keep up with the tax law, enrolled agents are required to do 72 hours of continuing education every 3 years to keep the license up to date. And some of the other states have these continuing education requirements as well. Several years back, the IRS actually attempted to put some tax preparer regulation in place. They did this program called the Registered Tax Return Preparer Program. And so it was a test that you took to become an RTRP, but then there was a lawsuit because a lot of the preparers out there didn't like this regulation. Basically, the IRS didn't have the authority to do that. And so the case actually was overturned, and the IRS was no longer allowed to register tax return preparers. So what they have now is something called the annual filing season program. It's a voluntary program that unenrolled preparers can do, where you agree to voluntarily do a certain amount of continuing education every year, and then you're listed on the IRS website as a annual filing season participant. But one of the big issues that is happening to taxpayers, and it's a very huge problem with the IRS. It's actually on their dirty dozen tax scams out there, but there's something called ghost preparers. And these are tax preparers who will prepare a return. They'll charge a fee to prepare the return, but they don't sign it. So when they give the return to the client, it says self-prepared on the bottom. And so the clients file this return indicating that they've prepared it themselves. It's a big issue, and there's a lot of fraud on those returns. And at the end of the day, when it comes back onto the tax preparers or on the taxpayers, they can't say, I paid this guy to do my taxes, and so I don't know what's on here because it was indicated as being self-prepared. So that's one of the things really that I think is important to let the public know about, is that if you pay someone to prepare your return, if they don't sign the bottom of the return, that's a big problem.
Okay, so one of the things that I'm hearing is, first of all, anybody can hang out a shingle and call themselves a tax preparer, and that not all tax preparers are created equal. So you need to be aware of some things that might put you at risk. And because of that, it sounds like by going the designated route of working with an EA or even a CPA, you're less likely to probably be red flagged for an audit down the road. So is that something that you've seen, is working with EAs actually reduces the risk of being audited for people that are filing?
I think when you work with an enrolled preparer, a CPA, an EA, even a tax attorney, what you're getting is somebody that has passed certain standards of competence, and they're required to do this ongoing education. So I'm not certain that it would necessarily reduce the audit risk, but what would be more likely is that if in the case of an audit, the return would stand up because you know that what you're getting is a quality product.
And that you've signed your name to it.
Absolutely.
Okay, then is there a benefit to maybe hiring a tax professional as opposed to doing it yourself, or a time when you ought to think about making that leap?
So I'm a little biased on this one, full disclosure. I think that just about anyone could benefit from working with a tax preparer. The tax code is so complicated, and it's not getting any easier. Every time they do a simplification of the tax code, the entire tax industry kind of braces for what's going to happen, because every time they simplify it, it just gets a lot more complicated. Back in 2018, when we had that big tax overhaul with the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, the 1040 became a postcard that had 7 additional schedules attached to it. And so, the rules change all the time. And if you're not constantly keeping up on it, we're required to do 72 hours every 3 years. I think I do over 72 hours every year just because I'm a nerd and I love it. But, if things can change, and if you're not aware of some of those changes, things that seem very straightforward can actually be a lot more complicated than you think. And you could be missing out on a lot of potential benefits by not working with somebody who's in this stuff every day. And I tell you, I've seen all kinds of crazy things. I had a friend, a very intelligent friend, who was doing her own returns by hand and was actually double taxing herself. She was charging herself taxes she shouldn't have been charging because she didn't, I'm just filling these forms in. It seems like this. And so we ended up amending her returns and getting her a lot of money back. And especially if you're using something like TurboTax, which is it's a fine product, and I think they've made a lot of advances. But if you don't know what's supposed to come out on the other end, clicking one box incorrectly can make some really strange things happen. And you just kind of trust that that's how it's supposed to look. And so having the peace of mind of being able to work with someone. And on top of that too, I think taxes are really fun. Most people don't. And so I always tell my clients, like, isn't there something you'd rather be doing? Wouldn't you rather be, riding a bike or reading a book or knitting or baking or hiking or something fun instead of spending however many hours you spend doing your own taxes? Just let somebody else do it.
And one of the things that I have seen from our conversations together, Shannon, is that you are aware. Well, first of all, you get 72 hours a year of education as opposed to every 3 years. So you are really someone who is passionate about the tax law. You're always on top of it, and that you're aware of what's going on behind the scenes because of your associations and involvement in the industry as well. So working with you would be seen, from my perspective, as an investment as opposed to a cost, because you're going to be looking out for my best advantage and the ways that I might be able to get a reduction in my tax bill because of the fact that there's something that I could take advantage of that I might not know as a lay person. Is that something that you found with a lot of people that have done it all these years and they come to you and you're like, oh my gosh, you could be doing this and it's going to save you so much?
Definitely.
And so what about going the next step for people that have more complicated tax situations? Are you able to also help them with the strategy and the planning as well?
Yeah, I think that the planning part of it is a really huge piece that a lot of people overlook. People think of tax time as January to April. And it's my opinion that if you've done your work between April and December, when you come to file your taxes in February or March or whenever it happens to be, there's no surprises. We know exactly what's happening. It's very smooth because we've put those pieces into place all throughout the year. We keep up on withholding. We make sure that we're working with financial advisors and strategizing as far as that sort of stuff goes. And so if you ignore it until January, the chances are much higher that you're going to end up with an unpleasant tax bill or something like that. I like to work with my clients all year round. If there's a big change, if they're changing jobs, if they sell a piece of property, because a lot of times if we get to that stuff in time, we can do some tax advantage planning for it. If we deal with it, come March, April, there's not that much that we can do. So being proactive about it, I think, is so important.
Then part of what I'm really tuning into that I'm hearing from you is that you don't want to just meet with your tax preparer right before the deadline and dump all your receipts on their desk and say, here, can you get this filed by next week before the deadline? So
you could do that, but you'll probably get a grumpy tax preparer out of it.
Absolutely. There should be a tax penalty just for doing something like that. But part of what you are looking at is you want to, instead of be reactive to where someone's coming to you say, I ended up getting divorced this year. And so we sold 3 of our properties and I went ahead and had to take out something from my investments as well to pay off the settlement. And instead of hearing that after the fact, they ought to be talking with you before they're going through the process or as they're going through the process, because you might be able to give them some recommendations or strategy that will help them when it comes time to their filing. Is that part of what you've seen also?
Absolutely. And there have been situations, I'll tell you, one of the biggest ones we see is pulling money out of retirement accounts, because there are so many additional penalties and tax implications to doing that. And so we've done some planning with clients before where they'll come and they'll say, we want to do this big project. We're thinking about taking it out of the retirement. What does that look like? And by the time they see how much they would have to actually take out to cover all of the taxes, they come up with a different way to do it, because the tax implications are really, sometimes they're very painful.
Okay, then I want to just say for anybody that is joining us is that see your tax preparer as someone that can save you money, and you want to inform them and touch base and get their input, because it might save you money in more than ways than you expect, and not just with the direction that you're going with it or the actions you want to take, but later on when you have to file your taxes as well. So really see them as someone who's on your team, looking out for your best interest. And if you tend to be a preparer and you're thinking about moving in this direction of getting your EA designation, then look at the fact that you can really expand your role with your clients of offering tax planning and tax strategy, which is a higher value service. So just want to put in a plug for anybody thinking about moving this direction of going the EA route, is that it really advances the value of what you can offer your client, and it raises your level of professionalism as well. So I probably just answered our next question. Why someone ought to consider becoming an EA? Please go ahead and share that also.
I mean, I think for all of the reasons that you just stated, but also, again, like we talked about earlier, because we do have these unlimited practice rights, it gives us so much more freedom to be able to help our clients in ways that we couldn't otherwise. And, if you are in a situation where you have a new client who maybe is under audit, if you're not an enrolled preparer, you can't help them. You would have to pass it off to an EA or a CPA or somebody else who has those practice rights. And, a lot of time, not all the time, but in a lot of cases, if they get handed off to somebody else to work with their audit, they decide they want to work with them moving forward. So from a client retention standpoint, that's something that's really helpful. And also, I think just being able to do that peace of mind, if you have clients who are trying to file back years, who haven't filed in a number of years, being able to go in and get all the information you need to pull those transcripts and really get the lay of the land in a way that you couldn't otherwise, it's definitely helpful, and it adds to the value that you can provide.
And I want to just ask one more question that's coming up for me about people that are looking to become an EA is, do you find that there's seasonality, and maybe if you do have a tax practice, that there's things you need to look at as far as the ebbs and flows of income, or is there a strategy maybe to offer year-round income? So I think that those are some of the things that happen because it's a seasonal business, more or less, or traditionally been. So what's been your insights regarding that, your experience?
Well, it's funny because the last 3 years, because of all the weird extensions we had, the COVID extension, and then last year's extension, this year's extension, it's been less seasonal than it normally is. But yeah, we have our busy season from January to April, and then we have another little busy season from September to October. But there is that big lull in the middle. And if you do representation work, if you do collections work, it really is a year-round revenue stream that can definitely add to the services that you provide.
Okay, great. Because I know that my brother is actually a CPA, and that he does taxes during tax season. And then the rest of the year, he is focusing on some other things that are of interest for him. So for him, he chooses to have it be very seasonal, where he's working a lot of hours and he's really doing the grind. But then he has a lot of months off to do other things that are of interest. And then I've seen other EAs and CPAs that it becomes a year-round endeavor for them. But you could go either way.
Absolutely. And colleagues who just specialize in representation work, so they don't have a season, they just have sort of a steady year round as the clients come in, and it can get very involved, and it's a fascinating area of tax. And so that whole specialty it's really interesting.
And if someone's interested in going this route, they've been thinking about becoming an enrolled agent, and it's been appealing to them, what are some of the steps that you recommend for actually making it happen?
So there are 2 ways that you can become an enrolled agent. The first is that you work for the IRS for a number of years and you demonstrate that you have the competence from that experience. The other way is to take an exam. It's called the Special Enrollment Exam. And it's a 3-part test that's administered by the IRS. They do it at these Prometric testing locations. But it's a 3-part exam. It's individuals, businesses, and ethics. And once you pass those 3 tests, then you are enrolled to practice before the IRS. You have to meet you have to have all your tax returns filed and up to date. And, you can't have certain sorts of criminal background, but basically that's it. You take your test, you pass them, and then you become an enrolled agent once you've demonstrated that you have that competence. And in order to pass the test, there are a number of different ways that you can do it. There are a lot of self-study models out there. When I took the test, I did a self-study. I bought the package and I failed the practice tests up until the day I took the test and then passed it, which was fun. But there are all kinds of different programs you can do. There are really in-depth ones that teach you all of the information you need to know to be able to actually do the job of enrolled agent. There are more boot camp style trainings that you can do, but there are so many options. And if it's something that people are thinking about, I absolutely recommend diving in and doing it.
And from your experience, is it better to take all three parts at once or to maybe go ahead and take one at a time?
It's generally better to do them one at a time. They can be pretty daunting. It's 100 questions and you generally have 3.5 hours to complete the test. So trying to do all of that in one go would be, they used to do it as a big long test and then they split it out into these 3 sessions. So it's usually nice to get one test out of the way, pass it, feel good about it, and then go in to take the next one after you've had a little bit of time to beef up on the information for the next part.
And any particular timeline that you would recommend from when you are taking your first test to when you ought to be ready to take your third one?
So there is a time period. I should have looked this up right before we jumped on here, but I believe you have 2 years from the time that you pass the first exam to pass the third one. You can only fail them a certain number of times before it resets, but I think you have 3 chances to pass it. And then for each part, you have those 3 chances. So from the date that you take the first test and pass it, you have, that many number of years to get all 3 of them done.
Okay. So it's about 2 years as far as the maximum time it ought to be.
Yeah. And I would say it's generally better to try to do them all in the same tax year period because they do adjust the tests for each year's tax law. So if you've been studying really hard with the 2022 tax law and you're taking the test now, if you wait until the next year to take the next part, you've been studying all of the 2022 law, but the next test is going to be based on the 2023 law. So it may be harder to kind of catch up to that. So trying to do them as close to each other as you can, I think is probably the best strategy.
I think that what you just shared about that and that they do change it for each year's tax law is a hidden gem that most people wouldn't know. So thank you for that tidbit. And I just want to say, Shannon, every time we talk, it is a fascinating conversation. I love the fact that you are so passionate about taxes because it's something that's painful for most people and that you play at what others struggle with. So you made some really great points today. Part of what we covered is if someone's interested in being enrolled agents, how others would benefit, how clients benefit from doing that, and the path to start becoming one. And if somebody wanted to have a further conversation, they wanted to go down this path, Shannon, what's the best way for them to be able to find out more or have a further conversation with you?
Definitely. So you can find me at my website. It's shannonhalltax.com. If you want to shoot me an email, I'm shannon@shannonhalltax.com. Also, if you are interested in becoming an enrolled agent, I do work with a company called Brass Tax. We teach a boot camp style training, which I think is really valuable, especially for people who've been in the industry a long time and know the law really well, but maybe struggle with test anxiety, because that's a really big issue. I know people who can run circles around me knowledge-wise, but who just can't pass the test because they have the, residual test freak out from high school. We never really get past that. And so we teach test taking techniques and ways to really get over that anxiety and to be able to pass the tests. So if anyone's interested in that, I'm happy to talk further about that. It's a really great program. We have a virtual and in person, and I have a discount code if anybody's interested. So please do reach out to me. I'm happy to share that. And if you have any questions, like you can probably tell, I will talk about taxes. My poor husband hates it because we go out for drinks and I'm like, let's talk about taxes. So I will go on forever.
Excellent. Shannon, thank you so much for the engaging conversation and for everyone joining us today. This is Lauren Fogelman with Business Success Solution, showing county professionals how to double their income working half the time.